Hi, and welcome to the 26th video in our C# for Beginners tutorial series. In the last video, we took a look at hash tables, and today we're going to be taking a look at dictionaries, which dictionaries are very similar to hash tables, but they are the generic equivalent. And we're going to see what that difference exactly is. But basically, dictionaries are, again, key value pairs. They have some slightly different methods, and because they are the generic, they are a little bit safer to use, and again, I'll go over that when we actually build out our dictionary. So let's actually go ahead and let's get started. So once again, I'm always using just our employee class that we've created together. And I just kind of reassigned some employee names to the employees, so they're just a little bit different compared to the last time. Just this way we can actually see the different names and actually have a more realistic name set for our employees. So what we're actually going to do first here is create our dictionary. So to create the dictionary here, we're going to put in dictionary. And here we're already going to see that it is a system.collections.generic. So the last time it was just a collection, and a lot of what we've seen so far is just a collection. Now the generic, you actually have to specify the types. So in the hash table, all we were inserting as a key and value were two objects. Now, it didn't matter what those objects were. They could have been strings, they could have been integers, they could have been employees, they could have been cars. And you could put different types of information into your hash table. So you can have employees, you can have cars, and that can definitely break down your application because it could just get very, very messy in here. And you would actually have to code um, that type safety to make sure that there are only employees in your employee hash table. So the dictionary kind of simplifies that a little bit for you, because what we can do here is we can specify the type for the key. We're going to put that to an integer because we know that our employee IDs are integers, and then the values here, we're going to put that as employees. So we can only store employee as the value and the integer as employee IDs, basically the ID to our employees. And we're going to name that here, we're going to name that employee dictionary, and we're going to make that equal to a new dictionary, and then the lesser than symbol and greater than symbol was int and employee between the two, then open and close parentheses, and then a semicolon. And then it's very similar to a hash table afterwards to add in the employees here. So what we can actually do, so we have our employees here. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put them all into an array actually. This way it's going to simulate an API call to get all of our employees. So let's actually do that here. So let's create a array of employees. So let's do employee square bracket, and let's just call it in employees. And we're going to make that equal to a new employee. And let's go ahead and let's create some items in here. So let's first put in we are just going to put in Jack here. And then we're going to put in John, Penny, Abby, and Richard. And that should be good. Perfect. So here we have our employees here, all in an employee array, basically as if we simulated an API call to some sort of system to get back all of our employees. And then we're going to go ahead and load them in here. So what we're going to say here is we're going to say for each employee in employees. And then we are going to go ahead and we are going to say employee dictionary dot add, and we are going to add the employee dot employee ID, and then for the object is we're going to add the employee. All right, perfect. So once again, what we are doing here This top part is basically just simulating an API call to get all of our employees. And then we've created our dictionary that we're going to be storing those in. And we're just going ahead and looping through all of them and adding them to our dictionary here. And now let's actually make sure that we have all of our employees here, and let's list them all to the screen here. So what we're going to say here is we're just going to say for each employee e in employee dictionary dot values, and we're just going to do an e print info open and close parentheses. And let's go ahead and let's look at that here. So there's all of our employees. We see every single one. We see 1001, JackedProgrammer, 1002 is John Doe, 1003 is Penny Smith, 1004 is Abby Smith, and 1005 is Richard Smith. So everything looks good here. So this is really what I mean by it being a generic. So we are specifying the type, whereas the hash table, all it was just a hash table. And we know that that can cause issues, but there are also some other benefits to this dictionary, maybe compared to the hash table. So what we can also do is very similarly to the hash table, employee dictionary also contains the key, but it also has a new method, which is try and get value. So it would automatically try to get the value of the key. It won't just check to see if the key exists, but it will actually be very similar to the try parse. It'll see if it has the key. If it has the key, it will actually send that value out to an employee value. So let's go ahead and let's try that out here. So before we actually do that, let me just say console.writeLine, and let's just say all employees, just so we know what we're looking at. And then after we do all the employees, let's just say console.writeLine, and let's just say fetching employee with emp ID 1004, let's say. Let's try to get that one first. All right, so to do that here, what we could actually do is we can create an employee variable. So let's create one. So let's do employee temp. This is just going to be a temporary. This is what we're going to use for our out value. We're just going to set that to null for now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do an employee dictionary dot try get value, and we're going to say 1004, and then we're going to out that to temp. And then what we could do here is we can actually wrap that in an if statement, because if we just hover over top of the try get, it is a Boolean method or a Boolean function. So it's going to give back a Boolean value. So if we do an if statement in around that here, and if it succeeds, what we're going to do is we're going to do a temp print info. Otherwise, we are going to say console.writeLine employee does not exist. So if we actually go ahead and we run that here, we're going to say fetching employee ID was emp ID 1004, and there is our employee. So let's actually modify that ever so slightly. So let's put an int here, and we're going to say emp ID to get, and we're going to store that as 1007 this time. And let's go ahead and let's just do a string interpolation. We haven't done that in a little while here. So for that, we just need to add a $sign in front of the string. And then we're just going to put in our emp ID to get here. And we're just going to copy that instead of the 1004. And We are going to also put that in our failure message just to say to the user that that employee ID does not exist. So let's actually go ahead and let's run that here. So fetching employee ID, fetching employee was emp ID 1007. Employee 1007 does not exist. If we just change that once again to like 1003, which does exist, we will see that we actually do get that employee with 1003 and we get Penny Smith. So that works out perfectly fine. Now I didn't show this with hash tables, but of course there are ways to actually remove items and edit items in dictionaries and hash tables. So I'm going to actually do that for the dictionaries here. So let's say we had a employee that we wanted to actually remove. They are no longer with the company, so we no longer need them in our dictionary here. So we're going to create a new variable. We're going to call it emp ID to remove. And we don't need this here. And we're just going to say, so we aren't going to write anything in this case. And all we are going to do is we are going to say if the employee dictionary dot remove, and once again, we can see that the remove is also a Boolean method. So it returns a Boolean value and also removes the value, and you can also even out that value. So what we can actually say here is remove, and we can say we want to remove the emp ID to remove. Now you can just leave it just like this, and this would work. Or what we can also say is out temp, and we can actually say console.writeLine here, and we're going to do an interpolated string. And what we can say here is employee, and all we do here is emp ID to remove with name of, and let's put the name of the employee here. So we're going to say temp dot first name, and let's put temp dot last name has been removed, and perfect. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to try to remove 1001 here. Let's give that a shot. So as we can see, we do get our employee was 1003, and then we actually say employee 1001 was the name of JackedProgrammer has been removed. So let's actually just make sure to see if it's actually been removed. So what we're just going to do is we're going to copy paste this line here to go ahead and output all of our employees to the screen. And let's just rerun this here. So we can see at the top, we get 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. We fetch our employee with 1003. We just output that employee. And we go ahead and we removed JackedProgrammer with the employee 1001. And when we print out all of our employees, we actually just see 1002, 1003, 1004, and 1005. So that seems perfectly fine. It has been removed. Now, if we actually wanted to go ahead and also try to remove someone else here, so let's actually just copy paste that block of code again here. We're just going to paste it in here, and we're just going to remove the int because that variable already exists. Let's try to remove the emp ID 1010, which we know actually does not exist. And let's run this again here. We will actually see right after we remove JackedProgrammer, we will see employee 1010 does not exist. So we can't remove it. It does not exist at all. Now, the last thing that we can actually do here as well is also modify or update an employee. So let's actually do that here. So once again, I'm going to create another variable here. We're just going to call it int emp ID to update. And we're going to update 1005 here. I believe that that is a actual value. Yep, it is. I mean, if it didn't, it would get caught in our error handling anyways. So once we have our employee that we actually want to update, what we need to do here is just an if, and then employee dictionary dot, and here we're going to try the same thing here. So we're going to do contains key, and we're going to make sure that we do the emp ID. So it does contain the key here. And then all we would want to do is go inside this if statement and then go ahead and do employee dictionary. And then we specify the emp ID to update. And then we go ahead and make that equal to a new employee. And because we already know that, of course, the employee IDs should always stay the same. So we are updating the employee ID 5. And we're going to keep the first name as Richard, but their last name has now changed to Doe here. And we are going to just say console dot write line afterwards. And let's just go ahead and let's do an interpolated string. Let's just say employee ID emp ID to update has been updated. And then we can have an else statement here. And we're just going to copy paste this line here. So we're going to do a console write line employee ID. And then the emp ID to update does not exist. And we're going to print that out to the screen here. So if we actually run all this code here, we see all of our 5 employees get printed off the first time. Then we just get one employee, which is with the ID of 1003. We get our employee Penny Smith. And we go ahead and we remove the employee 1001, which is JackedProgrammer. We try to remove employee 1010, but they actually don't exist. We update employee ID 1005, and 1005 used to be Richard Smith, and now we see that it is Richard Doe. So here we have all of our employees minus the JackedProgrammer because that one's been removed, and our last employee here, 1005, has been updated. Now, of course, if we just change this to 1006, we will actually see that that fails here. Let me just restart that. Sometimes my Visual Studio acts a little bit funny. So here we will actually see employee ID, employee 1006 does not exist. So we get an error in our code, but we actually handle that very nicely. We don't let the application quit on us. We just nicely display to the user, this employee doesn't exist, we can't update them. You can make a better message because we don't really know if it's an update or delete here. But that would just be simply changing your console.writeLine or however you're displaying that message to your user. So of course, it is very, very similar to hash tables. But just let you know that the main difference between the dictionary and the hash table is, again, just going from a non-generic to a generic collection where we actually have to strictly enforce the type, which does make that a lot easier for you as a coder, just because it shifts that type handling from you in your code to then the compiler, because it will compile and it will make sure that only integers are going in there. And if for some reason it doesn't, obviously you should still have some error checking in there to nicely handle if you're giving the ability to a user to input something in that dictionary, that it handles it very nicely. But at least you won't, if you go through your testing and you don't have that, the application would throw an error. Whereas if you had a hash table and you had a user putting in some garbage information into an employee hash table, you might not necessarily know till that data is unfortunately really, really bad, and you would have to work a lot harder to actually fix it and maybe even find out where that issue is happening from. But of course, there are benefits and disadvantages to both. Hash tables are a lot easier to write. I mean, it's not much easier, but I would definitely recommend using both and just really seeing what you actually need for the situations. There are situations for both. So that is pretty much it for hash tables and dictionaries. The next type of collections we're going to be looking at, and the last types of collections we're going to be looking at, are going to be stacks and queues. So we're going to be looking at in the next two videos. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well. And if you guys have any comments or questions, please let me know down below in the comment section. I will definitely try to answer you guys as fast as possible. And also, if it's something that can benefit a lot of people, I will definitely be making a video on it. Also, be sure to hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out. And I will see you guys on the next video.